Hello, Artem. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. The lighthouse is
Good.
lit. Let me show it to you. I lit it on the first day. It's been
Okay.
lighting our path. And thank you for
Mhm.
joining this party.
Pleasure.
Lovely to have you. So,
Good.
I'm going to be off, and in case you need something, just call me back on. Do you need the slides right away, or will you tell it to launch them later?
Yeah, let's put up the slides and let me go through it. And then if you want to stop me at any time, please do that. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
awesome.
we're there.
Thank you so much. All right.
You can
So
see
yes,
you can see me.
Ing
Okay.
is
All right.
perfectly correct. Feel like home. Welcome.
Okay.
It's all yours.
Fantastic. Fantastic. All right. So what we're going to be talking about is about healing, change, and storytelling, and how storytelling can make you well, and also how it can make you ill. So let's just go through a couple of ideas as we go along. Okay, forget that bit. Okay, we start off with this uh, from Voltaire. The art of medicine consists of amusing the patient while nature cures the disease. Just a way of looking at diseases. All right. So we start with stories and narrative. And the way I talk about what a story is, it's a store of information and data. Right? Story is a store of information and data. If it's useful, it's called exformation. It's irrelevant information. And if the story is useful, you might share it, change it, and make use of it. Yeah. So here's our story, our narrative over here. We've got the past, we've got the present, where we are now, and the future. We don't know what that is, but we kind of think it could be based on what you've experienced in the past. So the difference between a story and a narrative is that the narrative is relating to timelines, things which have happened at a particular time. Yeah. So we're saying that something happened on Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and something else happened on Thursday, and so on and so forth. So the narrative is related to time and what happened, what are the things which happened during those markers of time. Right, let me go to the next one. Narrative medicine. So we talk about narrative medicine. It refers to a combination of art and science used to heal mind and body complex using storytelling. No practitioner does it quite the same way because narrative medicine skills are not formally taught in uh, where we go to universities and stuff like that. They're learned intuitively and through emulation of the extent that many healing practitioners use narrative medicine without actually realizing it. One of these things they talk about bedside manner for medicine people, and they are not taught about that, but essentially by looking at other doctors and seeing what they do, they pick up those behaviors and they start using the same thing as well. So what I thought in the last couple of years, I did some work for some organizations in the medicine area and the healing area and stuff like that. And I also spent some time with traditional African, what they call uh, sometimes they call them witch doctors and stuff like that, but otherwise it's healers or inyangas or something like that. And they also use storytelling in their works. I'm going to give you some ideas of how that works. Right. So, first of all, in that space, when you go, let's imagine a situation where somebody wakes up in the morning and they're not feeling very well. Maybe they're coughing, or there's something with their stomach or something like that, and they wake up with this and they don't know what it is. They don't know what, but they're not feeling pretty good. So they would carry themselves to a doctor's office, and when they go there, they create or they experience a multimedia environment. So multimedia is using one or more medium of communication And this is not just voice, but it is also things like sounds, environmental sounds, smells around you, tastes around you, all of those kind of things which bring back an idea of where you are and how you should be behaving. For example, if you go to a church or a temple or something like that, you might smell certain incense. You might hear sounds. And it tells you that you are in a particular space, and as a being in a particular space, you are doing things in a way which you might not do at home, and so forth. So you might find the multimedia experience at a bank and a hospital, sporting events, things like that. And because of that environment, you behave in a different way. So now, in this case, you're not well, you go to the doctor, and you get into this multimedia experience. So let me just go back over here. Right. So systemic relationships. So we have a nervous system, we have an endocrine system, and we have an immune system, and a number of other systems as well. And the story arrives, okay, to the left side over here, and it immediately triggers the nervous system. When you hear someone talking, that's your nervous system working. And based on the information which is arriving from the story, it is triggering other systems in the body, including the endocrine system and the immune system. So if you are listening to a story in the news, for example, about the World War IV is going to happen and all the rest of that stuff, that will trigger your nervous system. Your endocrine system is going to be triggering adrenal things like cortisol and things like that in your body. And now the endocrine system is triggering the immune system. And these systemic relationships are in relationship to each other. So change in one system triggers a change in the other system. So for example, if you're listening to stories about bad stuff happening, lousy stories, it'll trigger your immune system. And your immune system, when you start to become, because it's not working properly, then you start to become ill. So stories are really, really important because they change how you feel through these systems. Yeah. Here's some examples of traditional African, what they call Ngomas, Insazis, there's all sorts of names of these people, but what they do is they also do the kind of things which Western medical does. But this is quite a remarkable thing, because it's not just getting you better or getting you no longer sick, but we've got things like we can get you back your lover. You can win money on the lotto or stuff like that. So here's an example of what this Professor Msuwezi is doing. Yeah, stop diarrhea, all of that kind of stuff. You'll see that in the picture there. And here's another one over here. What he can do. He can take things. You can take misfortunes out of your life and stuff like that. So let's discuss about what actually happens both in the Western environment and also the African environment. Here's the Western environment on the right over here, and of course you look at the sangoma's place over there, and he's got all kinds of things there. But in both spaces, there's particular smells, there's particular environment, a space over there, and you'll sit in front of the healer, whatever kind of healer he is, and at some stage he's going to ask you, so why are you here? How are you feeling? These kind of things. And you will start your story, your narrative. This is what happened. I woke up in the morning. I wasn't feeling well. I was feeling a bit awful and stuff like that. So I decided to come to you. And of course, The doctor will, or the sangoma will listen to that, and at a particular part of your narrative, they will stop, they will listen, they will watch, they will touch, they will use a stethoscope perhaps, they will do all kinds of things. And at a particular point in your narrative, they'll change your narrative, they'll pick your narrative up, and then they will say things like, for example, you have got this, and it'll have a name, okay? You've got a name, and you've got this thing, and this is what is happening to you, yeah? And once you've done that, then we get into the area of the ritual. In fact, going to the doctor is in fact a kind of a ritual, isn't it, if you think about it? But at the end of it, you're told what it is, what's going to happen, and what you need to do in the next couple of days or weeks or months to change this experience which you're having, your illness, your sickness, yeah? So they take the narrative, they make the changes, and they will say things like, in 2 days' time, you're going to feel a lot better. Take 3 tablets. That's your ritual, yeah? And then let me know in 2-3 days how you're doing. And if you're still not, come back. Okay. So that's what you've actually done over there. You're starting a new narrative, and as a result of that, you're feeling better. Because you're okay. It's not a cancer. It's not really bad and stuff like that. And the doctor says, your authority figure. Because remember, the doctor or the sangoma is basically an authority figure, because having taken your story back, he is the author. They are the author of the story going forward, the authority. Yeah. Right. Let's go to the next one. So this is what I spoke about just now. What brings you over here? How are you feeling? Patient tells the narrative of their experience. Doctor might ask some basic tests with stethoscope, blood pressure meters, looking down the throat, etc. At the same stage, the patient's narrative will update. So the doctor will tell you what the disease is and what might happen and what needs to be done to change the situation or the ritual. Yeah. So there's similarities between both Western and African traditional doctors. Patient arrives into the multimedia space. The patient tells the narrative from their perspective. Often in traditional healers might actually show their prowess by saying to you, I know that you are here because of this and this. They'll tell a story. Yeah. Doctor takes the narrative, makes changes to it going forward. So what I found then is, here are some of the qualities of somebody who's the healer. First of all, they have what they call charisma, which is basically way of describing it is like you've got something special about you, that you've got, you're given by God or something like that. Yeah. So you've got that area. Then you've got performance skills as well, because you are performing during this process. And it's really important that they see you. The vision part of it is not that you are sick, but you are getting better. So that will give confidence to the patient, and then authority, creating a new story, and then some sort of power. Power is very difficult, but that some people who are powerful in certain ways, and it's because how they talk, how they listen, what they do, if they're really into what they're doing and stuff like that. So these are the qualities of the healer. And I've got some, ideas about charisma from the Greek word meaning literally given by God. And charisma is a rather ineffable quality used by the healer. It creates the impression that the healer is somehow connected to a higher authority, such as the medical establishment or the ancestors or whoever is there. And there's also the performance area. We're going to see a healer of any kind. So whatever healing modality you're participating as a patient, you're seeing symbols, hearing unfamiliar words, experience odors, sensations. All of these characters are in that space. Yeah. So the healer holds that space and telling, using stories and a ritual performance to create that new person. Yeah. As I said, vision, the healer needs to see and experience the patient as someone who has the potential of getting better. Authority, this is now creating a new story for someone, because the story which they were having was anxiety provoking. If you don't know what's happening to you, then you will start creating stories about yourself. What is this? What is going to happen and stuff like that? I need to do something about that. So the distressing story is transformed into a hopeful, liberating story. And it's told in an empowering way and given back to the patient along with a ritual to perform. So in other words, you'll get better soon, here, take these pills, etc. And power. Power needs to be experienced at a powerful level by the patient. It's conveyed through visual cues, medical degrees, animal skins, stethoscopes, white coats. So these are accoutrement of what is in the environment, the smells, the sounds, the gestures, the use of voice, technical jargon, and stories. It also includes the power to tell a convincing story, one that will be believed by the patient. You see, the patient has to believe the story, because if they don't believe the story doesn't work for them at all. Yeah. And then finally, the takeaways of this is that there are stories that you have that make you feel good. There are also stories that make you feel scared, anxious, and angry. Entertaining these stories, whether in the mind or telling it to other people, will impact your critical systems, the immune, the endocrine system, and the other systems in your body. So uninspiring stories can actually make you ill. So you can edit your stories, create your stories, drop old stories, and even create new stories and adopt new linguistics, new words into your system, and be discerning about the media that you consume. Right, so you don't get better till you get a better story. And that's it, more or less. Yeah. So, Artem, what do we do?
We thank
Are you
you
there?
for using speech. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Love
Okay.
it, Steve. Thank you for a great perspective. Let me copy your links to the chat so people can reach out to you. And guys, we still have time to ask Steve some questions. So if you want to, please write them to the chat. I see Yulia writing, I need that African doctor. The one we were talking about.
Can do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
While we're waiting for the questions, I have one of my own.
Sure.
Listening to your talk, I think there. I immediately think about how much we consume the stories without recognizing how they influence our inner system, but the effect can be measured, I guess, with some attention to it. What stories of light do you believe, as a practitioner, have the most healing effect in your experience? Like maybe some themes or some kinds of types of stories can be especially useful.
Well, oftentimes the way which people use stories and the way they talk about themselves to other people who are listening to this, it's almost like it becomes real. And the important part of the listener is to give some sort of feedback and to maybe ask questions around it. There's no particular story, but essentially it's like listening to the story and giving feedback about it. For instance, some kind of feedback would be something along the lines of, how do you know that? How do you know that that's true? These kind of questions, and then get some sort of a dialogue with that about how they're talking about it, and particularly about the kind of words which are being used. The words are being used is if you have somebody listening to you, and they're the witness, yeah. So by telling something to say, oh, what a horrible time I'm having and stuff like that, when you are saying that, you are having the horrible time then, right, right in that time. So it's like just becoming aware of how you're telling it, whom you're telling it to, because it becomes real. So it's very, very important. So we just listen to it and saying, well, maybe you shouldn't use that way of talking to it. Could you see it from another point of view? Could you? How would you?
So
How would you
it's
feel? Yeah.
sorry. So just to be clear, it's less about the story you are listening to as a patient. It's more about the story you tell as a patient and the feedback you get.
Correct. And to change that story with which they come in with that, and now there's a new world, there's a new possibility as a result of where we are now and what will happen tomorrow and the next couple of. So I'm actually saying to you that you've got hope, you've got possibility, because if you don't have that, then you'll feel worse as a result of that. So it's getting better. It's fine. It's all right, and that's got to come from an authority figure, somebody who says, well, from my point of view, you're okay. You've got and normally they will say, oh, there's a virus going around, and take this and that. I'm sure you've heard exactly the same things as well. But essentially what it's saying, it's giving you peace, a little bit of peace, that you're not in a terrible situation and that you're going to have to go to hospital and stuff like that.
I heard exactly these words, but recently when my son got ill and the doctor was all about, this virus and kids are taking it pretty badly, like with high temperature. Kosti is doing okay compared to what is happening around. And we're like, okay, it's fine. So that's the authorship. I get that as a parent. Okay. We have one question from Madina. She is asking, could you share if some specialists, like family docs or surgeons, or it depends more on the personality, use that more than others?
I think it's very difficult to answer that question because everyone's got their own way of doing it. They will have seen it with other doctors and specialists and stuff like that. But the whole process is to make you feel kind of okay. Obviously, if you've got an anesthetist, you won't speak to him at all. He'll just like put you out. But essentially, you've got some sort of an authority figure who actually shows that they know what they're talking about, like your doctor did with your son. And he said, well, this and this and this is happening. And he was basically saying, don't worry, it's actually fine. If he said to you something like, gee, I've never seen like anything like this in my life, or, oh, I don't know what this is called, and maybe you should find someone else. Now, if you heard that kind of story, you'd be frightened now. You say, oh my goodness,
big time.
What is it? Is it bad? Yeah.
It's like this joke, wow, you do have a rare disease. Yeah? What's it called? Well, you choose.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's a bad safety. By the way, about the anesthesiologists, I remember now, I had this operation when I was younger, and I was knocked out, like full body anesthesics. And at some point, I woke up. I remember this vividly, but I couldn't open my eyes. I couldn't move my hands. I couldn't move anything, and I was choking hard. Like I was like, I instantly saw this, blackness, and then a light. And I was like, okay, well, that's it. And a tube coming into my mouth, and I go, and I fell immediately back to sleep. So for like 10 years, I believed strongly that I cannot take this form of anesthetics. And then anesthesiologist that was operating me like 2 or 3 years ago in a local operation, he asked, would I like to be sleeping? And I shared the story, and he said, don't be afraid. Probably your previous doctor did a bad mixture, because one drug takes you to sleep and another one knocks out your feelings. And one of them just ran out earlier, so your body was asleep, but your consciousness woke up, and I was like, I'm okay. Oh my God, I didn't have this context. Wow. So I get what you're saying about this part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's something interesting about anesthesiologist, anesthetic as well. Do you know how it actually works? How it actually works in your body?
Well, I'm not very, experienced in this part, but I know it, gets you to sleep. But...
So, well, it's what it actually does is that you experience the pain, but what it does is it messes with your memory. So you immediately forget the pain, but the pain is there. It messes with memory. And a couple of days afterwards, you also have memory problems and stuff like that as well. But that's how it actually. So you can't, when you had that experience on the table and stuff like that, there was information coming to you, yeah, and maybe because the mixture wasn't there, so pieces of that, and that was like quite an experience for you. And as you said, after 10 years, you still had that experience because in that experience, you remembered the bits because they didn't give you the right amount of medication. So that's what comes as a result of that.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
Steve, there are two more questions, I guess.
Sure.
And I guess they are related. So let me just try to connect them. Do you think the Western world should use more healers? Oh no, they're not connected. More healers, or instead of formal doctors? Asks Yulia.
Well, it's up to you what you feel is appropriate for you. So if you want to go to an Ayurveda, Indian Ayurveda, or Chinese medicine or something like that, it's completely up to you where you go to and for what. Because essentially it will always be the same kind of thing. You're going to have to tell a story about what it is.
So it doesn't matter what people use, like in terms of, in terms of society.
Effectively, it would be the same. Yeah. Effectively, it would be the same way. It would be asking, finding, watching, and then changing the story and doing the relative, creating it new. So you feel better as a result of it because you've given the story to someone else. They've made changes to it as the authority, and you take back the story and you move forward with that story.
Got it.
But if you don't have the story, you're in trouble.
Awesome. One more question here, actually two more. Is there a way to measure an effect of good narrative part on treating a patient, maybe a research or something?
It would be how effective that narrative is. If it makes you feel good immediately, because now you know that it's got a name, the disease has to have a name. And of course, you'll run to the internet and find out what it actually does and how it, this kind of stuff. But ultimately, you've got to feel that story works with you. And if that story works for you, then you're better straight away. Because you know you're going to be better, you're going to be fine. Of course, if it's a bad thing like cancer and stuff like that, that's often a death sentence because people, oh my goodness, and you because you've got the name of the disease. That's the problem of it. And many times people have messed that up. It's not the right disease. It's not the right thing to do. And then, of course, you're not going to. It's an interesting area.
Thank you.
Cool.
One final from Deepa, and we'll move to the traditional part. So, how can we start telling stories that help us heal, especially when we strongly believe in stories that are possibly making us ill?
Well, you have the ability to edit all the stories which are around you and inside of your inside of your brain, your mind, and stuff like that. And you have the ability to edit those things. I remember a situation years ago. I had this was actually told to me by an Amazonian a shaman, and he was saying that, we all have in the folds of our brain a little black snake which sort of hides up there. And then after a while, the little black snake starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And from time to time, you need to get it out of you, and you pull it out of your ear. When you find the right time, you pull the snake out of your ear, and now it's no longer there. The little black snake refers to all the bad stories we create or have created or have heard. Yeah. So from time to time, you have to look at that from the point of view, and you can edit your own stories. I remember a situation where I was telling myself a particular story. I'd heard it, and I was telling it, and I realized that this actually was like quite a toxic story. So I actually told myself, Steve, shut the fuck up, kind of thing. I don't want to, and I did that by doing that editing. So I don't want to, when I feel that story coming on, I want to have another ending to it, a better ending, which I did do that. But it's just become aware of that, because certain stories, because that starts to get into the area of mental illness, telling the same story again and again and not changing it. So in doing that, you're going to start to become ill. You're not going to feel good in your mind. So I don't know if that's a way of doing, but editing, creating new stories, creating new possibilities, and getting feedback from other storytellers. And in this case, it would be the doctors and these are the people who actually do this work. And they don't know it, but they do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I love the metaphor of the black snake. Feels like, separating the illness, the story that the person is like believing, and the person himself. Good. All right, Steve, one more question from me, and this one was a traditional. So a lighthouse can guide us from where the danger is, and a chain of lighthouses can guide us out of the dangerous waters, overall. So what story would you like more people to tell, just like building a chain of lighthouses?
Well, become the lighthouse at some level, and tell good stories to yourself, within yourself, and whenever you talk to someone, listen to them, and also tell good stories, and the lousy
particular
stories.
kind, like
there's not any particular. It's just, it could be a joke, it could be something which has happened to you, which was fun or interesting, or the things you've gone to do, and the battles you've had and how you've overcome them and things like that. So it's actually the stories which make you feel good. And sometimes some people tell you stories which actually are a kind of a downer, and giving feedback to that person, to like how do you know that this is actually like you said it is? Because ultimately all stories are made up. Somebody somewhere has made it up, and you might have taken bits of that story and you've agglomerating it to other stories and stuff like that, and you have your own story complex. So that story complex doesn't just it really becomes what you are, who you are, depending on the way you talk, how you talk, the language which you use, and the way you make others feel, as well as how you feel as well. So certain stories which I don't, I for example, I don't look at news, because I just think it's awful stories, awful, terrible stories. So as a result, I feel better. But I know people who do those kind of stories, and they want to say, "Oh wow, did you see what happened?" And these kind of stories. But it actually freaks them out, because those are the things which are in their mind. So can you imagine if nobody believed these stories? Maybe that, the world will be very different.
Yeah. It's really important to distinguish stories from events in that sense, like physical reality and what we believe in about it. So Thank you so much.
Yeah. Pleasure.
And we already have gratitude in the chat. So if I may,
Thank
please
you.
stay and
you.
have it for yourself, guys. Let's thank Stephen without all fires we have. It was a terrific talk, and I believe we all should have more great stories for healing.
Thank you. Yes,
Stephen.
heal yourself. Heal yourself. Make yourself feel better, and use the right stories. You become better when you think about these things. And remember, you can edit these stories anytime. You can drop a story, and you can do that with a ritual. I mean, one way of doing it is to take the story that you don't want to actually entertain for the rest of your life, write it down on a piece of paper, go out to the garden, crumple the piece of paper and burn it, and put it into the ground and stuff like that. Now you've got a ritual, and you will remember that you've done that, so it's no longer there. Find some better stories.
Love it. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to have you here once again. Please feel free to stay, and we'll